What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Punk Rock Horror Podcast Band Showcase episode. It's the first Wednesday of the month, which means it's a new episode for the Band Showcase. And so what we do is we bring on underground, up-and-coming bands who deserve a little bit more push and are ready for a little bit more of the spotlight. Today, I had Joseph Acosta from Taking Aplha, which, fun fact, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you're already going to know this, but he was our very first Band Showcase that ever came on and did a Band Showcase interview with us. So I hit him back up, and I want him to come back on the show to talk about what his experience has been since coming on the first time, being the first person, how Taking Aplha has grown, and just hear about the whole experience. And so without spoiling anything or giving anything away, I figured let's keep this intro short, and let's just jump into the interview. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Punk Rock Horror Podcast Band Showcase episodes. Today is a treat. We have an old friend with us, the first person to actually ever be on the Band Showcase episodes ever. Joseph from Taking Aplha has returned. How's it going, Joseph?
Good, man. Happy to be back. Thanks a lot, Matt.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. It's been a pretty wild ride for Taking Aplha. You guys have definitely have dug your heels into what you're doing. You dug your heels into your music and have come out with a new EP. You come out with some new songs, new content, you're playing shows, and you just kind of have started taking all over the world in small, big steps. So, what's the ride been like, man?
Well, it's kind of a ripple effect. We hope. You know, Taking Aplha is really one of those things that has always just, in my mind, needed to happen, no matter how much or how little support was behind it. I view it as something that's, you know, sort of larger than me, and I'm trying to keep it alive for that reason. And fortunately, we have some good people behind it, and we're playing shows again. Just dropped an EP, so the train is moving full steam ahead. So, I mean, we have a bit of a short episode today, so we're going to have to cover a lot of ground quickly, but I think we're going to do it really well. So first thing you mentioned was your EP, so let's jump into that. You definitely came out with this new EP. You sent me a copy of it, and I enjoyed it. I listened to it the night that you sent it to me, and I really liked it. It sounded just what I would imagine Taking Aplha to sound like. What was the process like making it? I mean, what was the whole inspiration? Well, as a fellow hardcore kid, hardcore, the genre has always been something I've been passionate about. I love metal, but hardcore is really where my heart is in the live shows. I just love the atmosphere of hardcore. I love the just the whole vibe, and you know, maybe not necessarily hardcore is my favorite type of music to play, but I think it was really important for me to include that in Taking Aplha's story, to start with a hardcore EP before maybe writing some more riffy, what you would say, I guess, metalcore type material. So Dead End is the EP that we just dropped, and that is more on the hardcore punk side. Of course, there's still thrashy elements and whatnot.
I would also say, to your credit, I mean, there is a definite difference between when you came on here, the music that was showed then, which did have more of a metalcore vibe to it, to what you were talking about now, Dead End. Definitely has that more Ghost Inside, hardcore, like, throwdown type of music.
Yeah, and the Ghost Inside is really one of my top influences, as not just stylistically with their type of music, but lyrically they are able to take a positive approach on some dark topics, and I think that's really important in the heavier genres, as we kind of talked about last time.
Yeah.
Also influenced by bands like Terror and things like that a lot. Hatebreed.
Yeah,
all those good hardcore bands.
Definitely, man. I think that's what's really interesting about the hardcore genre, is that it's definitely gone from the olden days of, like, I guess we'll use Black Flag as an example. Although more aligned with punk, they were like one of the more iconic hardcore bands to ever come out. And with that, they definitely touched on some, like, key issues in their genre, but you definitely saw that evolve and progress and mature with bands that you just mentioned, like Hatebreed probably being the biggest one.
Right.
And that's kind of ironic, don't you think, with how heavy it sounds, them taking a positive spin on certain issues, especially mental issues. Why do you think that is in the hardcore genre? That usually that is the writing material that we tackle is some sort of mental issues that, or even self-esteem issues. Do you think there's a theme there, or why do you think it usually aligns with hardcore?
I think one of the elements of hardcore and maybe heavy music in general is just the fact that everybody who's part of this, for lack of a better term, community, or I guess you would say movement, comes from this background of feeling different, maybe even feeling outcast from everybody else.
Right.
And I know a lot of people come from pretty rough backgrounds also in the hardcore genre. I'm fortunate enough to where I was always able to have a decent life even through like the economic downturn,
right,
and recession that took place when we were kids. But in a way, I think hardcore is one of the it's a way to process those sort of feelings of resentment or those emotions of being different, and it brings people together, because once you start listening to that, you realize that you're not the only one who feels those sort of things. And I think maybe positive hardcore in a lot of ways, like bands like The Ghost Inside, I mean, I would like to say that it's heavy and maybe even heavier, because being positive is harder,
right,
than being negative.
Right.
It's easy to be negative. Positivity, and there's definitely negativity in the music that we write, but being positive, a lot of times is a choice that you have to make.
Yeah.
And it's a struggle to do it. So because it's harder, maybe the music should be harder too.
I think what you're touching on is a really good stance here. It's a good point. And we can even sum it up with hardcore music being this channel for a lot of us who grew up because we grew up in a time in society where kind of like mental health was more of a suggestion than it was a factual thing. And it was, oh, you got to stay positive, you got to stay happy. And it, like you were saying, that is a choice. That is a hard choice to make, especially for every single day of your life. And so to have this type of music where they're channeling those emotions and they're channeling those thoughts, and you can relate to that, I think hardcore music does a service. I think it does a service for people where it's like, hey, you don't have to be positive. Positive's a choice, but let us help you get that anger out so you can at least try to be positive. And I think that means a lot more, especially to the fans. And I think that's why like bands like Ghost Inside have reached just as much acclaim as they have. And that's the same feeling I get from Taking Aplha, especially this new EP. Going into that, was that the inspiration behind this new EP? Was tackling some of those issues, or when you were making these songs, what was your end goal?
So some of the music I showed you the first time I was on the podcast, that's more of the direction that Taking Aplha is going. And those tracks, funny enough, are actually going to be on a future release. So Gravemind, I think, is the one that we showed, right?
Yeah, Gravemind.
That's going to be on the next EP, which is called Omega, and also has a self-titled track on there as well, and 2 other tracks. So that's what's coming up. As far as this EP, Dead End, that we just released, the hardcore, more hardcore, less metal EP. Not only did I want to write something that would pay homage to the sort of I don't know if I said that right. Pay homage to the sort of background that I have in hardcore, but I also wanted to be honest with some of the emotions that I was feeling, and sometimes hardcore is able to process those type of emotions, in my view, better than maybe metalcore is.
Yeah.
And I think that's just because of the anger aspect and the aggression aspect of hardcore. Obviously, it's present in metalcore, but I don't think the lyrics that are on Dead End would have worked necessarily in another style of music.
I commend you for being able to make those calls, because it's for me, I always think it's an admirable thing when you can know what type of feeling of a song needs to go with what type of lyric. I mean, Killswitch Engage, they are definitely one of those bands that knows how to write in those styles for that, type of mental health stuff that we're talking about. But I'm going to take it back to Ghost Inside, and even a band like August Burns Red, who just know what they're doing, and they know how to write this heavy music to talk about what's going on with, in their personal lives. And I think that is what's so great about the EP that you came out with. I think that's what's great about Dead End, is that it's not afraid to be vulnerable. And then I think even though we're in the hardcore genre, that is a staple, how you express that vulnerability matters. And I get that unique vibe from Dead End. So all credit and accommodations to you and in your band for bringing that to the table. I mean, right on. Speaking of bringing things to the table, so you guys have been doing shows. You guys have been out and about playing these shows. I mean, what's that been like? Has it been kind of this surreal experience? Because it's like when we were here last time, we were talking about like, we'll get the album out soon, kind of thing. And now you're playing shows. You have the EP out. So what's that been like?
Well, it's in a way, it's kind of been almost like taking a huge step back, and then we have to kind of build things up from there. Because as you know, Taking Alpha started in 2017, and we started in the Springs and kind of built a following down there, a local following. We built a lot of momentum and started even playing shows we started playing out of state and not regionally, and then we hit that hiatus and things kind of had to, go back to square one.
Yeah.
And after that, it had been like 2 years, maybe a little bit over 2 years. And we had an opportunity to open for a couple hardcore bands out of California.
Yeah.
And one was called Farewell and one was called Town Destroyer. And actually, I think one of them is from Texas, if I'm not mistaken. Great bands, though. And that was sort of a smaller show at Bar in Denver. But it was basically what broke the ice for us again to get back out there.
Nice.
And since then, it's starting to, slowly pick back up. And we have this EP, Dead End, to go along with it.
And you're so patient and humble with it the entire time that I do think a lot of bands that go on a hiatus and do come back, and even just young bands who are just still starting out, don't understand how much work that you have to put in, and part of it is the music industry's fault, because they do put this image out there of you're going to play like 3 shows and then someone's going to get word of you and then you're going to be internet famous like that. And I think a lot of people think that, and there's, to be fair, in extremely rare, and I mean extremely rare cases that does happen, but it's so rare that you can't even really put it on a board to kind of consider it a possibility. So I think the work that you have to put into it, a lot of people don't understand that,
Right.
And I would think from an outside perspective, people look at it and say, well, they're just playing the same songs. They, I don't understand the issue. Why can't they just, play them better? And then you hear those comments and you just get frustrated, because it's like, people don't understand. To a point, it is kind of like a job. You have to show up to work. You have to be ready to do the job, and you have to be ready to do it right. Everybody's there to have a great time, play an amazing show, and get people dancing. But at the same time, it requires a lot of work. I mean, so I admire your patience and your perseverance in that. I really do.
Oh, thanks, man. And the hardest part about it all is finding people who sort of, I guess, ride that same wavelength or are on the same page as you. It takes a certain type of person to be committed to music, and it takes another type of person to be committed to hardcore music.
Yeah.
And playing shows where there's like 5 people or 20 people, but they're all in other bands and things like that. And then playing those shows and still bringing 100% to that show, with the end goal that soon this will be 50 people who haven't heard us before, or, and soon it will be 100. That's always something that will take a certain type of perspective that not a lot of people have. And musicians are notoriously flaky people. If you're in a band or starting a band, it's pretty easy to tell that a lot of people, some incredibly talented people, don't necessarily have the mindset it takes to go the long distance. And I'm still grappling with whether I do or not. I hope I do, and I hope to attract people who do as well.
And I want to think how I want to figure out how I want to add into that without repeating what I just said. And I guess like there's no real way to go about it without repeating it. I mean, it's what you're saying. It's what we've been talking about, is that there is a commitment that needs to be involved to it. It is one that you need to be ready to really, roll with the punches. I mean, how do you handle those moments where you are doing a show and you don't get a huge turnout that you're hoping for? You're talking about putting in 100%. I mean, what is your routine? What is your game plan when that happens?
I'm one of those people who, even when I'm practicing, or rehearsing, practicing new music, rehearsing it, I try to perform as I am on stage. So it's one of those things that even if we're on a stage and we're playing an actual show and there are very few people there, different musicians have different ways of looking at that. Basically, sometimes it's like, oh, we'll just see this as a rehearsal, like a live rehearsal in front of people, versus like like what we would want to call a show, which you would hope has like a bigger crowd.
Right.
For me, I don't really care as much if it's a huge crowd or a smaller crowd. I think some of the best shows I've played were smaller shows, like at, especially house shows where there have been like 10, 20 people, but they were all throwing down and having an awesome time. Yeah. Versus playing a show at a venue and people are just kind of standing there. So I don't know. For me, every show's different. But I personally view it as whether there's 2 people, 10 people, the largest crowd I've ever played in front of, not in this band, but in a previous band, I think was in 400 or 500 so far, is my biggest one. Either way, to me, I think, whether it's 2 or, however many, those people are there to see a show. So they deserve to see a show. And I feel like I have to universalize my performance so that people get the same experience, whether or not there's a lot of other people there.
The show must go on.
Yep, exactly. The show must go on.
The show must go on. And I think that's a good mentality to kind of have. Look at it as, even if you have 2 people show out, they have the enthusiasm of like 10 people. So
right.
Do the math there, you got 20.
That's right.
Man, I think it's such, you always come on, Pierre, and when you always come on the show and you talk to us, you even though it's been the second time we've talked to you behind the scenes, you always bring a very vulnerable, transparent personality of who you are and your music. And I think that's what's so charming about Taking Alpha, and I think that's what's so great about talking to you and just hearing your songs, is that you are honest. You're not an artist who comes up boasting, trying to put on a facade. You are who you are, and then when we hear your music, it's just a complete difference in tone because you're in the hardcore, version of yourself. And I just enjoy that, man. I enjoy talking to you. Sadly, we argue.
It goes both ways, buddy.
Yeah, we're pretty hardcore on the podcast. We throw down a lot.
That's right.
So we got to start wrapping this up. So Dead End has come out. Where can everybody pick it up?
And your favorite online retailer: Spotify, Google Play Music, iTunes, Apple Music. Amazon, Deezer, pretty much all the major ones, I think.
Okay, and Omega. Do we have an idea when that's coming out, or? I'm
hoping to drop that fall or winter of this year.
Fall or winter, so that's not too far.
Before the end of 2020.
It's not too far.
If all the stars align on that.
Right on. And does Taking Alpha have any upcoming shows that listeners can go check out?
We're working on actually arranging a couple, and hopefully we'll be putting on an EP release show for Omega. So Dead End is already out. Go find that go stream it. I don't know if you can pirate it yet, but you can definitely listen to it. It's on YouTube as well. So go listen to Dead End, and keep an eye on our Facebook page for shows as they're announced.
Right on. Any last words of advice or anything you want to say to listeners before we wrap up?
Well, summer's coming to a close. We're going into fall. Be safe, stay warm out there, and we look forward to seeing you and hope you like Dead End.
All right, well, thank you again, Joseph, for coming on. Thank you again, Ghouls, Gals. We'll talk to you soon on our next Band Showcase episode.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
All right, bye. Perseverance. That would be my perfect word to describe Joseph. And you could hear that completely from his interview that we just listened to. I mean, the dude, he, no matter what's going on, he keeps pushing forward and not giving up on taking Alpha. And I think that's what I love about taking Alpha, and that's what I love about Joseph. I mean, he's a guy that gives a shit about his music and gives a shit about his craft. And when it comes to music these days, especially in the underground scene, we're always looking for bands that are serious about what they're doing, and it's not just a pastime. And you see that with Joseph in Strides, and I commend him for it. I'm always going to commend him for it. I'm always going to commend every band for it. But I think Joseph is a very good example, because ride or die, even if it's by himself, he's going to make sure that this band succeeds. And with that, being said, please consider helping them succeed by liking and following their links below, listening to their music. They have that new EP out, which is great. We're going to jump into a few songs here, but I just wanted to do the closeout in that way. And hopefully, Joseph, if you're listening, thank you again for coming on. It was awesome having you on. And yeah, Ghouls and Gals, let's jump into some new music.